Well, kia ora from Rarotonga, Cook Islands. This is Pastor Tevai Matapo, commonly known as Pastor Bobby. And this is my dear wife, Poko. And of course, we are privileged to have Joni and Marianne for lunch today. We are situated on Muri Beach, the most beautiful spot on Rarotonga and the most popular beach on Rarotonga. As you can see, the weather is hot, but thank God there's a little breeze blowing and keeping us cool. But Joni tells me that in Finland right now it's about -1 degrees or 0 degrees. Now I think we prefer to be here in Rarotonga. As you can see, this is Muri Beach, but I was born further south. This is the eastern side of the island of Rarotonga, but I was born on the south side of the island, a place called Titikaveka. And of course, that's also the church we were ministering this morning. I was born in 1947. That seems a long time ago. And grew up in the village until I was about 13 years old, or 13 years old, and then I travelled to New Zealand to attend school in New Zealand for 5 years, and from there I studied meteorology, that's the weather, and worked as a weatherman for 4 or 5 years, and from there I transferred into the police department in 1971, and I served in the police department of the Cook Islands for almost 30 years, and part of that time, of course, I would serve in the New Zealand police as well. My last 7 years in the police was as a commissioner or chief of police for the Cook Islands. As I was saying before, I spent 30 years in the police, Cook Islands Police, and my last 7 years was being the Chief of Police or Commissioner of Police for the Cook Islands. Now, of course, when you are in the police department, you need to continue studying, and that is when I was introduced to university studies, and my wife and I went to Auckland in New Zealand and studied at Auckland University for 2 years. After completing that, we came back to the Cook Islands, and as we progressed through our career, we continued to study by distance education through the University of the South Pacific. And in our late stage in our career, we both studied for bachelor's degree, and after we completed our careers, we both took on the MBA, Masters in Business Administration Studies, through the University of the Pacific, South Pacific rather. And so we have been students all our lives. We have not been Christians all our lives, but we were in our early 30s when we heard about the gospel. I was age 32 at the time when I gave my life to Jesus, and so I've been serving Jesus for over 30 years now with my wife Poko. Of course, at the moment right now, we're pastoring 2 churches. I pastor one church and she pastors another church. So on Sundays we don't normally see each other in the morning because we are both preaching in different churches. But it goes back a long way. We started being pastors way back in 1983, and when my senior pastor passed away, we took over the leadership for the Assemblies of God in the Cook Islands. Although we were one church at the time, back in 1984, we eventually grew to 4 churches on Rarotonga, and we have 4 churches in the outer islands. These are the islands off Rarotonga. But we also got involved with planting churches in Australia and in New Zealand. And that's on top of my job as a police officer. Kia ora from Rarotonga, Cook Islands. We are at the wharf where the Kaksikala and Kari used to birth. Of course, if Kari saw these pictures, he will know it does not look the same as it was when he was here 20 years ago. The whole wharf complex have been upgraded. Government have spent millions of dollars to get this harbour the way it is today. And basically it's to allow the international shipping to come in to the harbour without staying outside of the reef, where sometimes the weather could be rough. Now, coming back to the vision that Kari had about Christian boats doing mission work in the South Pacific especially. Now, for me personally, being an islander, I think that's an excellent vision, and I think it's a God-given vision, but I think it's so big, it could happen at any time. It could happen within a short period of time, but as we know, it hasn't happened, but it could happen any time. Simply for the fact that in the Pacific Islands, you have so many small island states scattered around the Pacific. And of course in these island states they have many islands, populated islands in each of the state, and sometimes they are unreachable by aircraft and so on. So this is where the boat missions can be useful. I mean, we've dreamt about it for almost 20 years now, and it is a difficult vision. One man cannot achieve it, 2 men cannot achieve it, 1 country cannot achieve it. And I think Kari had the right perception where he sees Christian boats from different parts of the world able to be resourced to do the job. Now, admittedly, maybe the people in Europe or the United States of America do not appreciate the vastness of the Pacific Ocean and the scattered nature of the islands. So it requires a good infrastructure behind such a mission. You're talking about boats, seaworthy boats, going out to the Pacific Islands and are able to do perhaps 8 months, a year of mission work and then you've got the cyclone season to deal with. In those situations, you've got to find a safe harbor. And certainly, of course, here in Rarotonga and in the Cook Islands, there's not many safe harbors. This one is not safe during the cyclone season because, as you can see, it opens right into the open sea. But we do have a harbor over here on the island of Penryn. It's an atoll about 780 miles north of Rarotonga. It's hardly ever touched by cyclones. It's a safe harbor during the cyclone season. And as far as Kari was concerned, that would have been an ideal location or a safety harbor for those mission boats that are operating in the Pacific. By berthing up there during the cyclone season, then you don't have to take the boat back to America or to Europe, wherever they came from, which can be costly. So that's, I think, the number one of the major difficulties is a safe harbor. And secondly, of course, you've got to have the support system on each of the islands, and that can be a fairly costly operation, even though you have local churches, but the economy over here is very low, and therefore you cannot really expect too much financial assistance from the local populations. And of course, I think that was key in Kari's mind in bringing mission boats that can also do commercial operations like fishing. Now, that is an excellent idea of raising the income, because you've got to have a constant stream of income to support such an operation. Like I said, the South Pacific is a very vast ocean, scattered islands, so you need a lot of resources to support that. And if it was possible to operate the fishing boat aspect of the Christian Boat Association, then we can actually generate sufficient funds to support the operation. Otherwise, there will be a strong reliance on home bases in Europe or America, and if it's not forthcoming, such a vision will just collapse. Now, I think the vision that Kari has planted is a God-given vision, even though it hasn't quite happened yet, although it has been tested out and it works. But unless you have the infrastructure behind it to support it, it's going to be very difficult. I know there are people who would say they will move by faith and they are excited about it, but faith without works, in a sense, comes to nothing. So anything can happen if you just move by faith and you don't have the structure behind it, because God wants us to use our brains to plan ahead and to foresee any unforeseeable circumstance that could happen, and we should be able to deal with that. So that is there's a lot of issues that needs to be looked at closely, and that this is where communication becomes very important. Communication between the islands and the Christian Boat Association in America or in Europe. There has to be up-to-date, ongoing, clear communication, so that everybody is on the same wavelength. And yeah, so I think that is really the issue, that number one, to understand the local situation, that if you've watched extreme sports, that's what this kind of mission work is about, because it's not just going onto the land and preaching the gospel and so on, but you've got to deal with the seas, and sometimes the seas in the Pacific are very, very rough, and that's why I say, it's kind of comparable to extreme sports for those who will be involved. So those are the issues: the sparseness of the Pacific Ocean, the size of the Pacific Ocean, the sparseness of the island states, and within those island states, the islands are scattered. While the boat is the best way to get through to them, but you have all these difficulties to deal with. Then you're going to have a base in each of the island states to give some support, but they can only offer perhaps hospitality kind of support, but to expect a bit more of that, the economy is just not there. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to, we here in the Pacific, certainly in the Cook Islands, we're just going to sit back and wait. No, we are looking at every possible means of raising fresh avenues of income, so that not only we can deal with the needs of the mission boats, but we are also involved in church planting here in the Cook Islands, in Australia and New Zealand. So and of course, in terms of mission, Christian mission boats, then if the Cook Islands is involved in it, we have to work it along with our own local visions or national visions for mission work. So I think those are the two important things, that there is an understanding of what the size of this operation, simply because of the nature of the island states and the vast Pacific Ocean. And then you've got to have the infrastructure behind it to support it, both here in each of the islands as well as in the home bases in America and Europe. And then you've got to have the personnel, of course, the people that are willing to work in the mission field, sometimes without pay. There's no place for self-gratification. It's just to work for the Lord. And as I said, it's going to be like an extreme sport kind of approach. And but you've got to have faith, you've got to have perseverance, and so on. So those are the type of people. It's not a holiday. I can say that with all sincerity. It will not be a holiday. It'll be work, and it'll be hard work. But the challenge is, do we have the willingness to face that challenge and bring glory and honor to Jesus Christ?